Airwolf said, are Wyatt 6 victim of expectation? Lots of expectation from fans. Too much expectation can result badly with creative. I don't think so. I do agree there is a balance, but I think that on this occasion, I think the finger has to be pointed either at creative or at circumstance. I actually don't think on this occasion that it is pointed at the fans, because if you hype up a group like the Wyatt Six and it's going to carry on Bray's legacy, I think there's a few things that you can sort of take as allowable. I think there's a few things you can certainly say, okay, that's a reasonable expectation, right? So I think a reasonable expectation is that the group are going to look good in the early stages, right? I don't think you'd expect the group to come in and lose their first feuds. I don't think you'd expect them to lose their second feuds, right? I think that's a reasonable expectation. And so they've come in, they've had their first feud, they got the better of it, but it didn't achieve much, did it? Like Chad Gable, American Made, they're just as awful as they were before, and that's okay, but I wish that we had seen a little bit more of them being panicked. I wish we'd seen them a little bit more being frightened. I remember one backstage scene where I think Kathy Kelly said, Wyatt Six, like, joked, they're behind you, and I remember them all sort of jumping and being a bit all panicked. I wish we'd kind of done a little more there to get across how intimidating the group were, right, in that first feud. So for me, they won the first feuds, but I think we could have just done a little bit more there. But that's okay. That was okay. It gets a pass, right? But I don't think anyone would look at that final Testament feuds and say that was acceptable. The fact that they were made to look so weak, you know, Uncle Howdy getting powder in the face, and now we just haven't seen him since. And then we get told there's going to be a final showdown match, and then we don't get it. And then we find out they get moved to a different brand, and now the feud is over. I mean, there is nothing about that booking that is good enough, that is acceptable. That is all on them. That is not on the fans, right? That feud didn't even get seen all the way through, did it? That feud, like, we were told we were going to get a final showdown match. We were building towards it, and then we didn't get it. Could we revisit it? Sure. But, you know, it feels like, you know, Carrion's moved on to Sammy. We just haven't been seeing the Wyatt Six for week after week after week. I mean, the inactivity, I think there's only so much inactivity fans are going to accept. I think to benchmark it against how often we saw Bray would be fine. And we saw Bray on a fairly consistent basis. So, you know, I think people would be okay if it wasn't every single week. That's fine. And I think people are willing to give a little there. But we are going, like, I don't even know the last time we saw them. As of right now, we haven't seen them in 2025 because they weren't at that premiere episodes, and I genuinely don't know when we last saw them. Like, we're not just going weeks, we're now starting to stray into months where we're not seeing them, and that's not right. That's not right. So, like, maybe if they'd have done like a big feud and it had been a big war and it had resulted in like a big cage match and they were all busted, you know, like CM Punk and Drew. Big feud, big war, took everything out of them, and they gave us a message of, you know, we need time, we need to heal, like, we'll be back. And then they went away for a few months. I think people would understand. I think people would honestly understand. But there was nothing even. The first feud was damp, wet, just about gets a passing grade. The second feud was a mess, never got concluded. And also mixed in there, you've got large periods of inactivity, which we're honestly at the point now where we're having to, without really much knowledge, make excuses of, I bet there's an injury. I bet there's something happening behind the scenes. I bet someone's ill. I bet someone's injured. We're having to make these excuses because it's the only thing that fits. It's the only thing that explains the situation. And so I can't put this on the fans. I can't put this on the fans. There's too much there that I think is reasonable to have as an expectation of just wanting to see them and wanting them to do well in feuds and wanting the feuds to conclude, you know? So I don't mind having a conversation about where fans' expectations can get out of control, because I do think that does happen. But I think in regards to the booking of the Wyatt Six, I think there's enough there that I can point at to go, no, I think that's a reasonable expectation that was not met. And honestly, it really could be that there's an injury. It really could be there's an illness or someone hurt themselves whilst training, or Uncle Howdy hurt himself during that match. We know of the Alexa contract issues. It genuinely feels like the booking has become so derailed that it has to be an external factor, like illness, injury, contract disputes, travel issue. That's how bad the booking has been. So it's a really interesting conversation, because I do agree there's times where fans' expectations kind of run away with them. But in this regards, I'm going to stand by the fans, and I'm going to stand by the fact that I think that there's some very basic expectations that have not been met. If they had been met and people were still complaining, then I think I'd be ready to have that conversation. So